Hello everyone, this is Mitch and welcome to another Kerbal Space Program capsule. So today I'm going to tackle the topic of docking. It's going to be extremely relevant in the following episodes in my Let's Play, and it's generally useful knowledge. So how do you successfully dock two vehicles? Well, it's going to sound cheesy, but it all begins in the vehicle assembly building. So we're going to jump in there. I'm going to show you an example, a real example here, using my Kerbal Mark II lander. So for my next mission, I wanted to dock this thing with a interplanetary transfer module. So long story short, using the level 2 landing pad, I was limited to 140 tons worth of payload at one time on the launch pad. So I had to split this vehicle in two, basically, between the actual lander and the module that would take me, to another planet. So I needed to dock these two once in space. How do you do this? Well, it's gonna sound stupid, but you need monopropellant. Well, you don't need monopropellant, but let's just say that if you can dock two ships right now without using monopropellant and RCS, then there's probably no reason for you to watch this video. So you need monopropellant, and you're going to need either these things here, the thruster blocks, and sorry, I gotta adjust my headset. So, alright, so you're either going to need these thruster blocks or these linear RCS ports. I like the thruster blocks, it's much easier to set up, but how do you set them up? The important thing is the center of mass. It's by far the most important thing. You're going to notice it's almost right on top of my center of mass. Now, my center of mass is going to move, and yours is going to move as well, depending on where your fuel tanks are located on your ship and whether they're filled or not. If you put your fuel tanks perfectly in the middle of your spaceship and you balance the weight in front and below and wherever around the fuel tanks, then maybe your center of mass doesn't move when you spend fuel or pump fuel into the fuel tanks. But for most vehicles, it's going to move a little bit. So if we can showcase this, if I fill these tanks, you can see center of mass has moved a little bit below the thruster blocks. But it's not so significant that it's going to create huge problems. But the further away your RCS thrusters are from the center of mass, the more it's going to induce roll or pitch or yaw in your vehicle. Now, I'm not saying you have to put thruster blocks exactly on top of the center of mass, but you need to balance them. So for example, if I wanted to, I could add more, and I could put some above the center of mass and below. And the important thing is that they are at equal distance on each side of the center of mass. So in this case, I decided to put them almost on top, and that's fine. The other thing to be wary of course, once I dock something here, center of mass is going to move down, and then it's going to be imbalanced. So that's something to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is you should probably use a four-way symmetry when setting up RCS thruster blocks. You could use 8-way symmetry if you really wanted. It's going to give you more thrust. But you need to use at least 4 because, let's see here. If we look at these, we don't need the center of mass overlay. If I'm trying to go this way, or to the left of the screen, I have this port here and the other port on the other side. So if I only use 2, and I only put 2 like this, and I'm trying to go let's say, deeper into the screen, or right, looking like this thruster block has no thrusters pointing right like this. But these two do. So four-way symmetry is important to have full control at the minimum. And that's it. And of course, having a docking port for a docking operation is an obvious thing. And that's basically it. Like, just make sure your docking port is easy to reach, and having monopropellant and RCS thrusters. And you're basically set. Of course, you would probably like to have some torque in the form of reaction wheels on your vehicle, on your docking vehicle at the very least. And it probably helps if you have SAS enabled and active on your target vehicle, just in case you bump it. It's not, critical, but if you bump your vehicle and you don't have SAS active, it's just gonna spin endlessly until you either time warp or turn on SAS on the target vehicle, and it's just annoying. So, have a good setup. Now, you could use, for example, fuel depots around Kerbin and want to dock with them to refuel them, and to connect a vehicle to it before a mission to refuel it. But that's easy. That's the easy part of docking. And really, if you've watched my Rendez-vous video, you can probably figure that out pretty easily. So instead, I'm going to jump right ahead and go one step more difficult. I'm going to try to dock with a module that's actually in orbit around the Mun, going from Kerbin. And actually, this module, I even made it on an inclined orbit, just to add some difficulty. So I'm going to show you, if you have interplanetary fuel depots or anything like that, how you can reach them from another planet reliably. So we're going to jump to this Kerbalo lander around Kerbin. I'm going to show you how to dock with it. So first of all, of course, the first step is, again, if you remember, to aim 1/4 orbit in front of the Mun to get an encounter. So we go on the opposite side on Kerbin, and we shoot for that quarter orbit. And there we go. That's an encounter. But of course, that's not quite enough. We don't want to get just any encounter. So if you've watched my getting and tweaking orbits tutorial, this is going to be the crucial part, because we're aiming to dock with a vehicle around the Mun, so it's very, very important that we actually aim carefully at the Mun. So here, focus view, we can see our vehicle. So I'm going to correct my trajectory to get in an orbit close to the orbit of my target, but not quite the same, because there's no guarantee that my target is going to be nearby when I get there. And if it's not, I'm going to have to adjust my orbit to be either above or below it, so that either it catches up to me or that I catch up to it. So there's no point in going super precise at this point, but you still want to be close enough. So this thing is orbiting at a perfectly circular orbit around 20 kilometers up from the surface. So we're going to aim maybe 10 above or 10 below or 5 or anything like that you feel comfortable with. Of course, the greater the difference, the faster a craft will either catch up to the other, but it also means that it's going to be further away when it does catch up. So it's something to keep in mind. So in this case, let's aim for about 30. That's good enough. And we're going to burn a little like this. Now we don't want to burn too much like that, but we want to burn a little inclined. To reduce the amount of burning we will need to do once we get around the Mun to get an orbit that's roughly on the same inclination as our target. So like this is good enough. We're going to get ready for the first maneuver. Activate the engines. Time warp a little bit since we're already close. And there we go. So roughly half the burn in front, half the burn after the node. And we can physics warp to make this process easier and faster. For some reason there seems to be a little bit of torque applied on the thrust, but that's okay. Almost there. And cut, and we're going to finish the maneuver as precisely as possible. And there we go. That's it. Now we've got our maneuver there. We're going to need to readjust it because our maneuver was not perfectly a perfect replica of what we had planned. So like this, good enough. Target maneuver is there, and again, time warp to our next maneuver. There we go, watching the time. Close enough. Time warp a little bit more. And we can actually go ahead and tap, or even go all the way, and just watch our orbit change. And finish the maneuver slowly. And there we go, good enough. So now we're going to get close to our target. Not quite on the same orbit, but very close. So we're going to time warp again until roughly here. Here we go again. We're going to start placing our vehicle's attitude to point it somewhat retrograde. Of course, it's going to change because we're so close to the surface. Oh, and we're lucky enough that we're actually kind of close to our vehicle. So there we go, we can start circularizing. I'm just gonna eyeball it. Alright, close enough. We're gonna wait until periapsis to avoid screwing up our orbit too much. Although I could do this. Or this. Wrong radial. Okay, I'm just not doing it right. So let's wait to periapsis. And circularize it a little better. Pretty good. And now we're going to target the vehicle we want to dock with. So we're actually going to be closer on the next orbit. And the other thing is we have an ascending and a descending node. So we're going to want to work with that to match orbits as much as possible. So there we go. Time warp to the maneuver node again. And you can see our intersects have gotten closer just by preparing this maneuver node. We can already tell it's going to be a much better intersect. So getting close. All right. And there we go. Now our next intersect is 37 kilometers separation, which is already a lot better. And now we can start thinking about getting even closer. So 25, 30, that was better. 22, maybe burn radial a little bit. We don't need to force it too much. There we go. 5.5 for 15 meters per second. That's pretty good. So again, time warp to the maneuver. Good, getting close, pointing the ship in the right direction. Time warping a little bit more. And executing the burn. And good enough, we're going to be 5 kilometers off from our target at this point. So again, being patient, you want to time warp until you get there. And then we're going to match orbits at 5 kilometers away, and we're going to move ourselves towards our target. And there we go, close enough. So what we can do here is move our prograde and or retrograde markers to point roughly towards the target, basically. That's going to give us a better encounter. So let's do this. Burning in between the markers, and you can see the next intersect getting closer and closer and closer. And there we go, 2.5 kilometers in just a little bit. And we can keep doing this until we're almost perfectly matched. So again, moving, dragging my prograde marker on top of the target marker by pointing my craft on the opposite side of the target marker from the prograde marker. So there we go, we'll be 300 meters away in a minute. So now we'll want to use the retrograde marker because we want to slow down compared to our target. Sorry about that. So this one we need to push. So, well, it's almost right on top, so we'll just burn towards the retrograde relative to our target. And we should be on the dark side, which is too bad, but can we actually make out? Yes, the station is over there. Can barely see it, it's in the dark. So we can do just a final little burn to get there a little faster. We can time warp a little bit. Hopefully we'll reach the bright side of the moon by the time we're ready to dock. Is it coming up? I hope it is. I'm actually going to wait because I want to show you guys how to do it best. So yeah, it's getting a little away from us, so I'm going to burn again to get closer to my target. Okay, I'm not gonna smash into it. All right, sunny side. So my docking port is below, right here, and the target docking port I'm going to use is right there. So first thing, I'm going to slow myself down to keep going, to stop myself from moving away so fast. So burning perfectly retrograde as much as possible. And now what you want to do is start off by pointing your docking port roughly in the right direction compared to the other vehicle. You don't want to mind the fact that you're not perfectly lined up with it, but you want your both vehicles to be in the relative same position. Now it's not perfect, but whatever. So I'm going to turn on RCS here, and I might actually control from the docking port. Control from here to make things a little bit easier. And I am going to attempt to move my ship towards my target very slowly, very gently. Don't want to make any abrupt maneuvers at this distance. If you're getting impatient, you can time warp a little bit. So there we go. Lining up ourselves better. And now, yes, you do need visual to help you, but you should rely on the nav ball quite a bit to orient yourself. Now, this feels kind of weird because I'm not controlling from the same spot. And the way you use the nav ball, it's relatively simple. You use the markers. So here I'm going to do this, and see, I see the prograde marker appearing, and I'm going to use the IJKL keys from the RCS to put my prograde marker on top of my target marker. And technically, if I was lined up perfectly, this would actually result in a successful dock. However, I'm not perfectly lined up, and this is where visuals help. There we go. turn the RCS back on, slow myself down. Now I'm kind of crooked, so I'm going to slow myself down again. And I'm just going to look around, turn off the RCS, I don't need. Just going to look around to line up the docking ports. That's all I'm using the camera for. Once it looks pretty good, I'm going to turn on the RCS again, and I'm just going to push myself into position again. And try to avoid bumping my little fuel depot. I'm just going to let myself drift ever so slowly into position. And now, once my attitude is pointing roughly towards the target, I can start going back towards it. Oops, wrong key. And again, if I put my prograde right on top of the target marker, it should result in a dock. So here we come. We are at a slight angle, but that should be plenty. 0.4 meters per second is decent speed. And hopefully these things are going to kiss, and boop. And that's it. We've docked. Now you might want to turn off the SAS for a second and the RCS. You want to toggle them the moment you dock, because the game is sometimes a little buggy. It's going to struggle a little bit with the change of center of mass and everything, and the different sources of torque on the spaceship, and you can see a kind of a death wobble of doom when you dock two vehicles sometimes. So toggling RCS and SAS to make sure that everything is off and then balanced again when you turn them back on. But that's it. We're docked. But you're not always going to dock from another planet. Often you might want to be to use this lander from the Moon's surface to reach back a station. So I'm going to undock this thing. I'm going to turn on RCS and move myself away. Turn off the RCS, and I'm actually going to sacrifice Chad Kerbin here for the purpose of this tutorial. This is a sandbox gameplay anyway. And I'm going to crash him into the Mun. Because reasons, well, I mean, why not? So, full throttle retrograde. Chad is going to the Mun. And no need to burn all the fuel. So, another case where you might want to dock, like I said, is from a landed position. Now, the biggest difference from a landed position is that you should wait until your landed vehicle is underneath the trajectory from your target. So right here, now the Mun is not the best example because the Mun rotates so slowly. But you can see it's rotating, and eventually this Kerbal lander is going to be straight under this line, and that's basically when you want to launch for the most efficient rendezvous with this fuel depot. So we're just time warping and time warping and time warping, and close enough. And now we're going to target the station, and we're going to make sure we're controlling this thing from the right place. Reaction wheels are running. Everything seems to be a go. Engines are lit, or at least ready to go. And now we're going to basically eyeball from the map view our trajectory towards our target. So still too small, and wow, I'm going in totally the opposite direction. That's fine. At this early stage of takeoff, it's perfectly okay. And you can see I'm just angling the spaceship to move my trajectory close to the trajectory of my target. And once I'm decently lined up, I'm just going to go back prograde. And there we go, 30 kilometers. We are in roughly the same orbital trajectory. So I'm going to wait until I get there. And by wait, I mean time warp. And then I'm going to set myself up to be in orbit above or below my target. So I get a rendezvous eventually. So we have periapsis. I'm going to stop the time warp. And there we go. We are in orbit above our target. Normally, since it's just a little bit ahead of us, it would be better to go underneath, so we go faster than our target. And so we catch up faster than this thing is going to catch up to us. But that's the gist of it. So from there, it's basically the same steps as before. And that's it. That's how to dock, basically. So if you've got questions, comments, or anything like that, leave them in the sections below. If this helped you or if you've enjoyed, please like and subscribe. See you next time. Bye bye.